There are two ways to use SilverEfex Pro. By the way, before I go into that, NIK software was the company that started SilverEfex Pro a number of years ago, and then it was free for quite a long time. And DxO purchased the rights to the software, and to get the newer versions, you must buy it from DxO. So DxO, Google DxO, and you can get to their website. But if you, at the end of the presentation today, I'll offer this. If you are interested in buying it, you don't have it yet, you're interested in buying it, send me an email. If I get a number of people interested, I will negotiate with DxO to get us all a discount. I have it, but so I don't need it to get a discount, but I'll try to get a discount for everyone else. And I've also been talking to them about being an affiliate. So if at the end, if you think you want to buy it, send me an email and I'll tell them how many people we have that are interested in buying the package.
Hey, John, if you can negotiate where you can buy out SilverEfex by itself, that'd be awesome. You wouldn't do it for me.
Only if you're financing it. All right, SilverEfex Pro. There are a number of ways of making a color image into a black and white. Before I start and show you some of the techniques, I found that SilverEfex Pro was the best for converting a color image to black and white. I studied black and white printing with John Sexton, who was Ansel Adams' assistant for many years. So the style of my black and white is certainly Ansel Adams' style, what he taught. And I looked at a lot of Ansel Adams' original prints at the Art Institute in Chicago. So I studied the tonal range and the shadow detail and the highlight texture and things like that. So I got really into that, and I spent 10 years in the darkroom perfecting my black and white printing. So I compare what I can do digitally to what I was doing in the darkroom. And I found that SilverEfex Pro, as you'll see, gives me all the tools I need to get an image to where I want it to be 98%. Sometimes I will take it back into Photoshop and do some dodging and burning, but you'll see today, your biggest problem today, you will find that multiple presets are so neat. You'll want to save multiples, not just one version. And I think SilverEfex Pro gives you, as you'll see, sliders to adjust things. But let me explain the software first. On the left-hand side, you'll see empty squares. When I bring in an image, you'll see them filled with the image, and each one of these will be named as to what the preset is. So the first one is just called neutral. The second one is 001 underexposed. But up at the top on the left, I have clicked on all presets. There are 58 presets that come with the package. You can click on subsets by clicking on these other options. But I find that just running down through the entire set of presets is not very tedious and very interesting to do. So I do that a lot. So on the left side, you'll see, excuse me, on the left side, you'll see what happens to the image. On the right side will be some sliders. So let me bring in an image so that we see how all of this works. Go up to File, Open Image. Oh, I'm doing this as a standalone. This package is certainly a plugin for Photoshop and Lightroom. And when you do it in that format, when you go from, I'll say, Photoshop into SilverEfex Pro, SilverEfex Pro, when you're finished with the image, it comes back into Photoshop as a separate layer. So you'll have the color layer, and above it, you'll have the black and white layer. And then you can do some things on it. But I don't think that's not the purpose today. The purpose today is show you this software and how good it is really to use. So I have a number of images that I've set aside here that I thought we could just work on to show you how this works. So I'll bring in the Yosemite image first. Everyone's, oh, See what it came up with, JPEG or TIFF. I always check, not always, I check at the bottom, do not show again, because I don't need to be reminded that it's good to know before working on a TIFF file, since you've imported images in TIFF format, you have the ability to resume editing later. Yes, I got it. Okay, good. Down in the lower right corner, way far down, you see it says save and edit later, larger files. Click on that to say, yes, I want to be able to save and edit files later. Certainly they'll be larger, but yes, I want to be able to do that. On the left-hand side again, when I bring in an image, you see all the different presets for that image. I'll go through those shortly. On the right-hand side, we have sliders that can be used to adjust. I will close the top one. See, it says global adjustments, selective adjustments, color filters, film types, finishing adjustments. If I click on the little arrow next to the global adjustments, it opens that window. And I can adjust brightness by the top slider. You'll see I'll do these things so you see how they work. I can adjust contrast and structure, which is sharpening. But within each of those, for example, in brightness, I could do just the highlights or the midtones or the shadows. And I'll show you the advantage of working on those. And we'll go through some of these other features on the right-hand side. But let's start now with the image. On the left-hand side, the first one is neutral. That's how it would be, just taking that color image and bringing it into SilverEfex Pro. If I go down to the next one, it shows me what that image would look like as an underexposed. Go to the next, and so on. And one of my favorites is number 5, because I found that number 5 comes very close to what I would want as a final black and white print. Let me click on number 6, just so you see the difference. You see on number 6, the shadows in the lower left corner get to be blocked up a bit compared to 5, which allows you to have more details in those shadows. Let's stay on the left-hand side before I come over to the right-hand side and show you some sliders and what to do. I often go down, pick another, that's, if I wanted to submit it as a high key image, oh, here's number 11. See what that looks like. The sky isn't really handled very well. 11, come down to number 13. The sky is much better, but the dark areas on the mountains are not looking very good. I'll come down to 15. 15 is really looking fairly good. I'll come back to 15. So I'll just go down a few of these to show you all the options that they have. Pick one down here. That's really crazy. Here's one with a blue tone and a border around it. Here's a sepia with a border. Here's a sepia with vignetted, highlight vignetting. You just click on them and there's the image. It's so cool. So we'll come back to number 15 to just take a look at that, and I'll show you the adjustments on the right-hand side. Here's number 15. On the right-hand side, I've opened global adjustments. Come down to structure and move the slider to the right, which just increases the sharpness of that image just a little bit more. Come up to the brightness slider, and I could do it, the top slider, which will adjust the brightness overall on the image. And I don't want to do that. I want to adjust within the image, just open up the shadows a little bit. So I will take the shadow slider and move it to the right, so the shadows are opening up. The midtones, I will darken the midtones just a little bit by moving that slider to the left. Now I'm getting that image really where I want it to go with it. Come down to contrast. I can do contrast overall, or I could amplify the whites or lower the amplification on the white lights. amplify the blacks, maybe lower those a little bit. That gives me more detail in the shadow areas. And maybe sharpen it again just a little bit more. So easy to have this image totally done as a very good black and white with details and shadow contrast. Here's some interesting things at the bottom. Now the finish, and I can get toning. I could tone this in any number of ways, and I can just put my cursor along each of these, and it'll show me what the image looks like as I pass over that and whether I want any of those tones.
Is tone, John, excuse me, is tone
Yes.
by, when you has showed sepia before, I've always seen sepia as kind of a brownish tone.
Yes.
Is that the definition of sepia, or sepia something else? Like,
No, sepia is a little different. Here it is here. Here's sepia, that they have 3 versions of sepia. There's that one, and that one. But even after I do that, I can go back to the adjustments and adjust my sliders based on picking this tone. I'll come back to that. I just want you to see what's available over here.
guess my
And then
question, yeah,
we'll do some other things.
guess my question is sepia a color or
Yes,
a
it's a
tone?
color. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's,
I can
Thanks.
vignette, and I can turn vignette on and off. I'm not going to do that today. Burn edges, but here's something really interesting and fun. It says image borders. It's turned off, but if I turn it on, I can just run my cursor up through the various borders that I could put around this image. Very creative, very artistic. So those are the features. There are more options and ways to adjust very specific areas called selective adjustments. I'm not going to go through that today. I want you to see the package first. Maybe I'll get to it at the end of the presentation, but stay with the global adjustments, the finishing adjustments, be it color or framing. At the bottom, you'll see loop and histogram. I open that and click on, yes, click on histogram. It shows me the histogram for that image. So as I'm adjusting the brightness and other items at the top, I can watch how that is affecting the histogram related to having good detail in the highlights, and do I have detail in the highlights and not. So the histogram is there to show me, see as I'm moving that, how it's adjusting histogram. Also, bring the cursor down and I can click on loop. And loop at the bottom, you'll see 0 through 10. Those are Ansel Adams zones. If I place the cursor over 5, it will put a color in the image where zone 5 exists. You can't see that easily on the screen, but if you do this at home and you put it over 4, my image is showing a lot of redness, little red areas up in the sky and down in the tree areas, because that's a zone 4. Zone 5, zone 6. So you can see the tonal range of your image. If you want to know if you have pure blacks, you put your cursor on 0, and on my screen over on the left-hand side, just under El Capitan at the water level, are little yellow areas. That's saying that's pure black. And then the stone in the lower right, with underneath the snow, is showing as pure black. Then to zone 1 is dark with a little more detail, but almost pure black. Zone 2 shows you that you have good color or good detail in the dark area. So you can analyze your image by just clicking on whatever tone and seeing what your image is made of. Now, this is this image. Let's play. Go to, if you want to save the image, you save as, and that's how you put it in the folder you want. Let's take this one. There's a color image. Now, if I just go down the different looks, watch the difference between neutral and watch the highlights around the halo portion of the image. You see it brought down some of the black, shortened them. Now it very different presentation. Here's a high key presentation. Another. You can just keep going down to the different ways of showing this image and deciding which one you want to work with. Then come over to the right-hand side and do adjustments there. Maybe just the highlight slider, just a little bit more to the right to bring up highlights, midtones. You can do infinite number of changes. Here's another one, cool tones. We come back up to number 5, which again is my favorite. Here's a neutral. That's number 1. Don't like that. Number 2. Here's number 5. And come over to my brightness slider on the right-hand side. Move that up just a little bit and contrast, create just a little bit more contrast in this image. And I would like to even increase the structure just a bit, bring some sharpness to it. Let's just scroll down, play, down at the bottom, finishing adjustments. Turn on the image borders. I'm just running my cursor up through the various borders. And we'll go with that one. We'll come back to this. Let me save this first and we'll come back. So save as. And I've created a subfolder of the ones that we are working on today called black and white. So I'll pick that folder. And I'll name this one. In the black and white folder. So now it's saved that way. I can come down, keep working on this and look at different ways of doing this. This is an interesting presentation. Let me see the wider one. That's really interesting. Let's come over to the right-hand side and play with the brightness. Really the contrast. Let's increase the contrast in this higher key image. No, that's a little too right. Oh, maybe not. Let's look at that. Amplify the blacks a little bit. And increase the structure. Have a very different look to this. I'll save this one so we can compare. Very different presentation. Striking. Not as nice. That's interesting. Oh, let's look at this one. There's number 15 again. I really like 15. I'll come over to the brightness side, increase the highlights just a little bit. Yes, and amplify the blacks and the contrast a bit more. Increase the structure. And I'll save this one.
I'm sorry. What? Oh, took down and.
Time to eat.
I didn't know they. And using them.
Time to
Back up
eat.
there.
Time to eat.
Somebody needs to mute their,
It is time to eat.
I know it is.
Oh,
you can see the variations that you can have. And just by clicking on the presets, you keep scanning down, you see the different presets here. This one also that we looked at before. Now I'll find something a little more interesting in the type of image that we have.
Okay, you know, I know. Or what help is I ran fan, you know, the circulating.
Larry Brown, mute yourself.
Okay. The camera know where it was?
Let me go back to open so that you see this image as the color image. Open my screen. Can you see the various images that I have for selection?
yes.
Yes, over here on the right is the
Yes.
color image of this.
Yes. Oh,
Now I bring it in and here's the conversion of this image. This is neutral at this level. This is underexposed, but gives a very different. Here's something interesting also. It's underexposed. You think, oh, wow, I don't want it to be that dark. Well, come over to the brightness sliders and open up the shadows. So you have various ways of adjusting that particular preset, not just that you must take that one and move the middle sliders a little bit, move it down, or go to the next one. How about a high key presentation of this image? And then lower the shadows by taking the shadow slider and coming down a little bit on that, and the midtones down a little bit. So we have another presentation of this image entirely from what we had here to what we now have here, and we can adjust some of the sliders. Go down to, that's why I said you have multiples. Here's my favorite, number 5. See the beautiful details in the shadow areas and the highlight areas. There's a little bit of brightness by the mountain, which works all right for me. Come over to the sliders again and do a little bit of dynamic brightness on this one. To brighten the entire image and keep the tonal range really well. If you come down to the bottom here and look at the histogram, you see the histogram has detail in the shadows and in the highlights. And if I run through the various zones, you see all the different zones. Get up to 10, there is nothing pure white except right behind the peak of the mountain back there. There's a little bit of blue showing that says that's where I have no pixels. So it gives me the ability to see that. How easy was this? You see the shadow areas here along the horizon. Well, I might want to open those just a little bit. So I'll take the shadow slider and just move that up a little bit, and I can get that to work well. I'm down to the contrast and give a soft contrast to this image. So you just keep playing to the type of image that you want that to be presented. I'm down to a different presentation. That's very similar. There's a different look here. And again, come over to the right-hand side and adjust some of the sliders to give you a look of how you want. About a high key overall. And in this case, stay with things high key overall, but just deepen the shadows a little bit. Move those to the left, which gives you a little more darkness along the horizon. Very different presentation. So easy to do without doing a lot of additional work on the images. Now you come down to the histogram, and you see that the histogram certainly has some areas that are pure white. Certainly behind the peak of the mountain, again, it's pure white, but overall gives you details in the shadows and throughout. Click on another version. Come down to click on this version. This version looks really good. Look at the histogram of this preset. And I haven't even used any of the features on the right-hand side. Let's just increase contrast a little bit and open up the shadows. Because in a black and white, shadow details are very important to have detail in the shadow areas. Very important. Now let's look down at the bottom here. Oh, here's an interesting one. Put a frame around it itself. It's a sepia tone. Let's open up the shadows a little bit so we look into them. Here's another really interesting presentation of this image, and all we did was click on it and move the shadow slider. I'll save this so we can compare it. Click on the one below that. That's a little too dense. Oh, that is an interesting presentation. And with the vignetting, maybe open those up a little more. I'll try the highlight slider on the right-hand side. Move that to the right a little bit. That opens those up a little bit more. Come down to the midtones and open those just a little bit. Lower the contrast. Yeah, well, lowering the contrast creates a whole different look to this image. Look at that. I could put that down, but amplify the blacks a little bit. Create a different look there. I'll save this one so we can compare.
Now, the histogram this time changed to red, blue, and yellow along
Yes.
with luminance. Has it been doing that all along?
No, it has not been, because the other ones have been pure black and white. So this preset must have some aspects of color in it, and that's what it's showing.
Okay.
Come down to this preset. It has a whole texture all over the image. Let's see the one below this also. See how you can get carried away just looking at the different ways to present an image with the presets. I think I would like a little bit more contrast on this. So bring that up just a little bit on the right-hand side. That's really interesting. And up at the top, I'll open up the shadows a little bit. There we go. I'll save that one also. Okay, we won't take too much more time on this one. It's just so fun to play with this. That's why I meant it's sometimes hard to get out of here, because the different presentations are so unique and presents the image in such a neat way, and you could have multiples from the same image. So let me go to a different one.